It is 7:11 p.m. The Wednesday, September 5th, 2018 meeting of the Evanston Preservation Commission is called to order. We have a special meeting agenda tonight consisting of 4 cases under new business. I would ask, I know that representatives from 917 Edgemere are here. Are representatives from 743 Michigan here?
Yes.
Okay. 2338 Bryant
Yes.
and 2610 Lincoln.
Yes.
I was going to ask the folks from 917 Edgemere, would you be agreeable to letting the commission hear these subsequent 3 cases in advance of yours, given that it will likely take, yours will likely take more time?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. With that, we'll call 743 Michigan to start. Mr. Ajami? And if you could, have you signed in already?
Yes.
And could you introduce yourself and your project?
I am, my name is Eric Thomas. I work for Egress Solar Electric. And we built this all on 12 photovoltaic panels on the southern facing roof of Mr. Jackson's house.
You want to walk us through the project?
Sure.
Briefly?
He says to move the slide into the presentation.
All right, so other than the 12 panels, it's really review. This would be the layout, so there's 6 on each side. They're all flush mounted panels. They come up the roof about 8 inches tall. They'll be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 20 penetrations into the roof. Will all be flashed up.
If you could speak up just a little bit,
Sure.
please.
So this is the southern side of the house. That would be the panels will be on each side of the dormer. This is the street view. We're going to go through a series of photos that we have taken and been drawing CAD photographs with as well to kind of display how they will be viewed from the street. First photo, the arrow points toward where the panels will be. It's in trees, unfortunately. And this is the north side of the house. Front of the house, panels will be where the red arrow is shown. Southern edge of the house, again, kind of blocked by trees. Won't really be able to see them too well unless you're on the sidewalk, and we'll come up at them, and you'll only see those first 6. Moving down a little further south, again, still kind of blocked by trees. From the sidewalk, you could still see those 6. Like that. And then further down the block, you can't really see it while you're driving through, and you can't really see it from the sidewalk any longer. We're just going to do our single line diagram, which is mostly for us. I can walk you through the single line diagram if you'd like. That's about it.
Okay. Questions from the commissioners?
The color of the roof and the color of the panels.
The color of the roof is seen down there from the aerial view. With Google, it's kind of the brown color. The panels themselves will be black, and all of the equipment underneath the panels will also be black.
Are those, in addition, you showed something in terms of the front elevation, are they visible from the alley, or is there an alley there?
I would assume that the back 6 panels would be visible from the alley on the southern side. I did not personally go back to the front of this. As far as the panel colors. Let's see if there's. It didn't include anything for me to show you what the panels themselves will look like, but it's basically glass with a black. The panels themselves, about yay big, 4 inches.
Any other questions on this one?
Can you speak up, please, because
Yeah, Sally.
I was just inquiring if there was a rendering or a superimposed rendering on a contextual photograph showing the panels contextually on the street.
Do you mean like one that you've already seen, or you're asking if there's another?
I think, well,
These are all sort of stylized and abstract. I was wondering if you had like superimposed the panels
something
on a
the
photograph.
actual road.
The
on
closest
the
to that
street.
would actually be that little picture in the bottom corner there.
there's that pointer in there.
Here.
Yeah.
And they're white in that picture because they're reflecting the sky?
That's
or
just this stock thing that we use in the different color groups.
Any questions? Do we want to see this one again, or do we feel prepared to take a vote on this?
I'll make a motion that we issue a certificate of appropriateness for the solar panel installation at 743 Michigan Avenue, and applicable standards for alteration 1 through 3, 5, 9, and 10.
Is there a second? Jamie? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is 2338 Bryant Street, or Bryant Avenue, sorry. And then if I can ask both of you to introduce yourselves.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you find buttons? You find the right.
My name is Jeff Herberholtz. I'm with Duty Sign, Richard Miller, our homeowner. Briefly, our project here consists of, in this photo, the left is the existing condition, and there's an open porch there that we are looking to replace with a new sunroom. The existing porch is in disrepair. That is the footprint of the new sunroom is almost identical to the existing porch. You can see beyond the sunroom our second floor addition, which cantilevers out over the first floor. So the next set of renderings would be more useful.
This is what you said.
We're missing printed copies of, I don't know if everybody has the renderings here. I have enough copies to hand out. So-
You can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead? If we need to share, that's fine.
What's that?
If we need to share.
Oh, okay. Okay, so the first rendering here is the view from the street, and basically shows there's a 6.5-foot extension on the second floor that we're proposing, so you can see the columns sort of sitting out there, and we've tried to duplicate the view that we took in the photograph. This is probably as much as you're going to see of any of the work that we're doing there from the street view. The following view is the one that was up on the screen previously, that shows the porch being replaced with the sunroom. And then the third view there shows our second floor being extended. We're basically keeping the first floor rear elevations of the existing kitchen window with the steps to the back porch are staying. Everything is coming out over that existing first floor wall, and then to the left is the new sunroom, which is just going to be clad in trim there, primarily a glass room. Small note there, we are adding air conditioning, so there's a full house fan, so there's a large louver in the gable that we are making a little bit more appropriately sized. And then if you go back, to the second image there, the one little detail I'll point out is we do have rafter tails shown on our new second floor overhang, and those are basically going to be similar to what's on the left side there of the existing little bump out to the north of the house. And we could, I don't know if the elevations are going to have any more information than the 3D rendering, so I guess I'll stop at this point unless people have questions.
Okay. Questions from the commissioners?
What was your thinking about the style of the new porch?
Let's have the style.
What was your thinking about the style of the new porch when you were designing it?
The porch?
The sunroom. the new sunroom.
Yeah, so Richard has views out to the golf course there, so we were trying to basically make that a glass room, but we didn't really want to or see an effective way to make this sort of part of the house itself, so we intentionally made this a little more contemporary structure to distinguish it from the rest of the house. But the main objective is basically just to fill that room with glass. And then we have a flat roof there because we had an existing window and an additional bedroom window there that we're trying to preserve light for the second floor.
I had two, I think, probably quick questions for you. I assume the materials on the addition are the same that
Absolutely.
are on
So
the
yes, it'll be the same shingles. Richard has the formula for the stain, so we plan to match that. The windows will be Marvin windows, and they will have the same custom detailing that are part of windows that had been done previously. The kitchen window, there's a couple of side windows that have same custom color, custom brick mold detail.
And then just one other quick question. On the second floor, were those I assume were windows that were part of the addition that was back there, is that correct?
I'm sorry, which windows?
These guys, right?
Yes, that's correct. That's part of there was a 1948 addition that was done. We're taking that wall down, bringing that 6.5 feet forward.
Yeah.
And then the new appropriately pitched roof.
Yeah, that was really a confirmation.
Okay, yeah.
The roof for this new glass room, it's now going to be a flat roof, is that right?
Correct.
And what is the material of the glass room?
I'm sorry, the exterior
Sunroom,
trim.
yeah.
We're planning to use oral trim, but we will color match it to the existing trim on the rest of the house.
Other questions? Comments? Are we ready to make any motion on this one? Yeah, does anyone here have an objection to this one? Thank you.
I'm a little bit concerned about the mixture of styles.
The thinking on that, I'm Richard Miller, I'm the owner, and I was the founder of the Landmarks Preservation Council of Illinois, and I was involved in the inception of this group many years ago with my wife Joan. We have owned this house for nearly 50 years, and we hope to finish it one of these days. Our thinking in the 70s and 80s was that additions to historic architecture that were not part of the original should be distinctive enough that you can see what was original, what wasn't. In fact, every bit, there is no, let me back up. None of the original fabric of this house that is extant from the 1920s has been modified over the years. This is the 5th time I've been before this body, actually, although I've not met you folks. And we've been working on this project off and on for the last 20 years. But we have, when we were younger, the original house had a very small porch. And in the 40s, the porch had a very bad extension at the same time that the shoebox was put on above the kitchen across the back that was ready to be moved. And over the years, it received modification and it deteriorated, it has been rebuilt, it's been modified. And so at the present time, the porch itself, the 2/3 of it is approximately the way it originally was constructed. But our thinking is that with the way the climate has changed, our age, etc., we don't use the open porch as much as we would. We love our interface with the outdoors, and we want to be able to air condition and make this a 4-season room rather than a part of one summer space. And I thought this is, and the concept of the glass, which is door height, and the window row across the top is a type of feature that you see in Beeman's work, rendered in the materials and style. In most cases, those were French provincial style rather than English cottage style. But this is a contemporary version of what he did in the 20s. And we, as owners who've studied this property for a while, are really in love with this concept.
Thank you. Other questions? Sally, did you have any follow-ups?
No.
Other questions? Are we ready to entertain a motion on this one?
Can I just ask real quick?
Sure.
How does this, how are we oriented with the public way here? I've lost myself.
It's probably, I would guess, Scott, you may have some ideas, but I would guess it's through the street since
This,
the golf course is
the
behind
golf
you.
course runs
Correct.
across the diagonal
the
side.
diagonal.
So this is the back of the home.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Any other questions? Are we ready to entertain a motion? And I assume, Carlos, you have applicable to standards. I'm assuming this is for alteration,
Yeah.
correct? And for demolition? Okay.
I move we,
No, construction.
Oh,
Yeah, the new.
okay, for construction? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. All right.
I move we issue a certificate of appropriateness for the project at 2338 Bryant Avenue. Essentially, removing the existing one-story open porch and our original second-story addition and constructing a new second-floor addition and one-story sunroom. Applicable standards for construction 1 through 4, 7, 8, 10, and 11 through 15, and standards for demolition 1 through 6.
Second. Robert? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
I want to thank you all for your consideration, and I'm really sorry that I can't give you my 40-minute presentation.
We'll take a rain show. Next is 2610 Lincoln.
Well, we do them instead of renderings because you can get hundreds of views by just rotating it, and it tends to be less deceptive.
Stuart, if you haven't signed in, please do so and introduce yourself.
Cohen and Hamper Architects. I want to thank the Edgemere Court Group for ceding their position. I was worried that I would be here talking about this at 11 o'clock at night. That was supposed to be fun and heavy. 2610 Lincoln, which you can see the landmark nomination for, was built in 1911 by Perkins Fellows in Hamilton. Dwight Perkins was the architect of many of Chicago's extraordinary public buildings, public schools rather, and he was a driving force behind the establishment of Chicago's forced resort system. We're really excited to be working on this building. I suspect that it's something that Perkins could have designed himself because the plan seems to be based on a ladies' home journal plan that his office mate, Robert Spencer, published in 1901 when Perkins shared office space with Spencer, Myron Hunt, and Frank Lloyd Wright for about 3 years. The house was landmarked in 1978, and at the time, no mention was made, or photographs of the rear of the house were included in the designation. And you can see there's a front, and there's just a kind of side view that you can see from the street. A one-story addition was made to the back of the house in 1995, and a third-floor addition was made to convert the third floor basically into a master suite. The one-story addition in the back of the house was a family room extension off of the area that had housed the existing kitchen. Our clients, who are the new owners of the house, love the house and want to maintain its character. They want a larger kitchen and family room, and this could really not be accomplished by expanding into the existing addition that was there, because the family room was built at a lower level. So the existing family room, or the 1995 family room, was down 3 steps. The proposed addition that we're doing will also require the demolition of a surrounding raised terrace. And our clients also wanted to add a weather break and mudroom closet area to the side of the existing house where there currently is a side door. Okay. So let's run through some of the slides. You can see the existing addition there, and then the terrace surrounding it, and a new proposed addition. There's the front of the house. A view from the side, and you can just, if you actually come onto the property, you can just begin to see the full addition that was made in '95, nicely integrated into the house and nicely done. This is that addition from the back, and you can also see the third floor additions that were made sitting on top of this section of hip roof. So that's all new in '95. And then the model that you guys are passing around and examining, showing the addition that we're proposing here, and then the new mudroom addition to the side, some more views that show the model, and then elevations. You all have this in your packet, so I won't belabor it. The commission asked that the proposed addition meet standards 1 through 4, 7, 8, 10, and 11 through 15. So standard 1, the proposed height of the addition continues the theme of the roofs at the back of the house that step down from the main portion or main block of the house along Lincoln Avenue. Standard 2, the proportion of the facades are compatible with the existing structure in both their height and width. Standard 3, the windows are casements which would match the existing windows in their height, width, and the scale of the existing leaded divisions. 4, the rhythm of solid and voids are represented by the grouping of windows on the addition into gangs of 2 or 3, which match the window pattern on the existing house. 7, then, new materials and textures will match those of the existing house, that is, it'll be stucco, as well as trim and rafter tail details shown at the mudroom addition. So the mudroom addition, which is shown here, it's a little hard to see, but you can see it on the model. The rafter tail, that's the projections that carry the roof, are actually matched to what's on the existing porch. The back, standard 8, on the back of the house, the roofs are a combination of gables and hips. The addition has a hip roof to allow the 4 south-facing windows on the second floor to remain unaltered, and that's easier to see in the model and certainly wouldn't show up in a ground level rendering. 10, the addition is compatible in scale because of its size and the repetition of elements from the existing house. 11, the gained windows and the continuous trim boards at their heads and at their sills are a feature of the existing house, and it repeats the directional expression of the existing facades. Sorry about this, but you guys asked. Standard 12, the existing structure and its character, we feel, are preserved. Standard 13, there are no archaeological resources affected by or adjacent to this project, unless we find thoroughbeds when we excavate. The design, 14, the design is not intended to be innovative in its form or exterior appearance. And then 15, there's no reason why this addition could not be removed and the house restored to its original historic condition. The 1995 addition already removed or destroyed the historic south wall of the kitchen, and we don't have any surviving documentation of its appearance. Lastly, the existing windows in the house are painted wood and they are single glazed leaded glass casement windows. The lead camming, that is the actual divisions, are 3/8 of an inch wide. The existing windows have contemporary aluminum storm windows on their exterior, which means that when the light reflects off of them, you can barely see that they're beautiful leaded glass windows. And also, because of the installation of the aluminum windows, they're practically flush with the facade. So the new windows that we're proposing, which are shown on the right here, will be painted wood windows, but they will be double glazed for energy purposes with 3/8 inch applied lead camming on the interior and the exterior of the glass. They will not require storm windows. We're using wood rather than clad windows because the installation position within the wall puts them closer to where the original window was, although that's really moot because you can't really see that depth from the exterior wall because of the aluminum storm windows. So I have a sample of the window we're proposing to use here. The window manufacturer supplied it to us. The difference is that it's a clad window, and we're using wood. And the sample shows what the applied lead camming would look like, except it is 5/8, and they have told us they can supply this at a 3/8 depth. So if anyone wants to look at the window, it's heavy. I could sit right there, just bring it up there. So, any questions?
Questions from the commissioners?
No?
Ken?
Sorry. Be with you.
One minor detail, I think maybe deserves one more look, is there's obviously one of the distinctive elements of the house, there's kind of tattered piers at the ends of those porches, and you're repeating that on the addition.
Yes.
You show it also at kind of the little wing walls for the stairs coming
Yes.
off the back. I wonder if that's maybe a little too much repetition of that detail. I don't think the original, it seems like the 1990s terrace did that, but I don't know that any of the
The
original porch
95
stairs.
terrace did that, and the addition did that, and the house has it at every single corner.
Yeah. I mean, I like it
You
on
get a
the,
directional batter.
yeah, I like it on the family room proper and on the mudroom proper, but I don't know if you need it, like on these little stair walls and this little stair wall here. I feel like having two in a row and the mudroom is maybe one too many. I mean, I don't object to it as is, but I think maybe that's one thing to study a little more as we find it.
Other questions, observations? Yes,
Do we get questions from the audience?
yes, I was going to ask for that next. If you could sign in, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Jim Young, and I live at 2607 Colfax Street. We moved in 1999, so we came in after the addition was built. So we are directly south of this building, which is an incredibly beautiful building. It looks like your architectural plans that you're considering are very well thought out. My question and concern, though, is the water. Because as I look at that plan, you're going to expand the footprint. It's not just the footprint of the addition, which takes in, you're going to tear down the original, the addition, make a bigger addition, but the patio expansion right there is going to take a lot of surface area out. And currently, we're getting a lot of water from the house to north right now. I just, as you all saw, that with all the rain that we're getting today, I went on the backyard, which is very flooded, and I've got pictures right here you can see a little bit of how much water we do get already. And in the garage, there's the downspout spout that actually drains right outside on the southern part of the corner, the southwestern part of the corner, and that comes down into our property. So we're already getting the water currently. With this expansion, especially with not only this building but also the patio, my concern is we're just going to continue to get more water. So my question would be, what are the plans to deal with the additional water that you want to move into our property?
We're aware of what happens when it rains because there's standing water in the driveway. I wasn't aware that the downspout from the garage was actually putting water onto your property, and that's easy enough to fix. The drainage on the property, we just haven't addressed. It's not part of this project. I don't know whether they will do landscaping or do anything to change the grade, but they're really wonderful people. I would have a conversation with them to figure out, and we can recommend a good landscape architect or a good civil engineer to figure out how to control that. With respect to the addition that we're doing, even though the footprint is bigger than the addition that's there, we're taking down an extensive area of terracing, which actually doesn't drain particularly well, as nice looking as it is. So that the amount of water that will be actually shed onto the property from impervious surfaces will be less than what's currently there. We're showing downspouts. We haven't excavated to find out if there is in fact an existing drain tile system around the house. If there is not, we intend to put drain tile around the addition to carry the water away from the house so it's not just being dumped under the ground.
And also, just as is there anyone else, by the way, who wants to speak to this project? Okay.
I mean,
Both of you gentlemen? Yeah. Because generally, sort of the water issue is really outside the purview of this commission. We're essentially looking at this as a project specific to a landmark property. So, but I would welcome you to speak, whoever is next.
who has the purview or the jurisdiction of the water-related issues?
Carlos, Scott?
City engineer will look at plans,
Okay.
and for the issue of permit, they will ask for contour lines on the SADA survey, and they will determine whether or not drainage is in requirements before they can issue the permit.
But
The
that-
city engineer will look at it.
Yeah, and that may be something that all of you, if you other two gentlemen are affected as well, would work together with the applicant as well as the city engineer to see if there's a solution that works for all of you. So, but in the interim, you both signed in to speak, correct?
Yes.
If you would like to,
I have nothing more to say. Jim.
nothing more to add?
Just two comments. My name is Joe Caproli.
And you signed in,
I
Mr.
did, and I'm
Caproni?
at 2615 Colfax. We are directly behind the student house. So two questions. One is, as Jim mentioned, when you're moving south, you're adding more impervious material. One of the questions is the patio possibly was impervious something, so we're not getting that watershed?
We currently don't have any plans for a patio, whether the
It's shown on the drawings.
No, that's the existing.
No.
All what you're looking,
where it is.
I can point with this. We are, okay, what you're looking at here are steps of, the main level of the house, which we're extending out into the new addition, is about 5 steps above grade. So there currently is a patio, a raised patio, that extends all the way around the much smaller addition. We've taken that down, and this is simply a wide stair with a landing that is the width of the French doors. Whether the owners will put a patio down here or not, I don't know.
Could you go back for a
Yeah,
second?
go to your site plan.
Sure. Sorry, I didn't put it on here. Okay, this is the existing, and you can see this is all impervious surface here. That's the new addition. This is not planned. What
So
we did was
we only
to,
raise it because it's on your drawing, and it's noted as an impervious area.
what we did was to demonstrate based on what the city allows as a calculation for impervious surface, the extent of a patio. Here's what I would recommend to all three of you gentlemen. In terms of solving the water problem, I think it's a real issue. I think the owner who has not moved in there yet is aware of that. If you'll give me your names, I will pass them along. And I think obviously the thing to do is to sit down with the new owners. They're very nice. They're aware of the fact that there are drainage problems and to address this. I have no idea whether
Yeah, and I would
That's gonna be a
suggest,
patio
I
or
would
not.
suggest that separately, there's a conversation that happens with the city engineer, but as I mentioned, this is really outside of the purview of the commission and what our decision is specific to this.
I raise it because of use of materials.
And I understand your point of view on that. That makes sense, but I think it's a separate question from this process.
My second and last question is, this happens to be a location where there is no dedicated alley. So as you look directly south to where that garage is, that's the fence to our backyard. So we are right there. So my question is,
you're back here.
we're right there. Is there any exterior lighting planned for the addition? And where might it be, what colors?
The only exterior lighting that is currently planned is what's required by code, which are lights adjacent to any point of egress. Okay, we're not planning on, well, we haven't done any landscaping, and I don't know whether the new owners will go to a landscaper or a landscape architect. I don't know to what extent they will want to do landscape or yard lighting. The only thing I can tell you is, and I don't know how they plan to use the garage, but if it were my house and I were keeping the car in the garage and then going to walk from the garage to the side door, I'd want some low-level lighting up, along the drive. But there are no plans for that currently, and it doesn't involve anything that is built onto or part of the house.
So the only comment we'd like to register is that some recognition of how the building is lit in the future.
And thank you, we appreciate that. Okay. With that, are there other additional questions for Stuart? Are we ready to entertain a motion on this one? Yeah, that was the question I had. Carlos, again, is
Construction.
construction, correct? Okay.
I'll move that we issue a certificate of appropriateness for the project of 2610 Lincoln Street as described in that the standards for construction 1 through 4, 7, 8, 10, and 11 through 15, along with applicable standards for demolition 1 through 6 have been met.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, next is 917 Edgemere.
Gentlemen, will you leave in your names, addresses, and phone numbers?
And just so while Fred, you were presenting this, correct?
Yeah, Gary and I.
Okay. While Fred and Gary are getting ready, just for the benefit of everyone, I just want to go through the process. So folks, I know we have a lot of folks in the audience tonight, so I did want to mention that essentially, as is noted in the agenda, this is an item for new business. Essentially, Fred and Gary will present the application, and then essentially what will happen is the commission will likely have one or two small questions, points of clarification that they want to understand. Then we'll have persons both in support of and against the application speak. We also have some statements. We received a number of emails and a petition from people both for and against the application, as well as there's a statement from Commissioner Julie Hacker, which comes under Section G of our rules. And then the applicant will be given the opportunity to rebut, and will summarize, and the commission will then discuss the proposal. And obviously, as we're going through the discussion, if there are any questions or answers necessary, we'll go through that as well. So with that, Carl, can I ask you to hand me the sign-in sheet there? All right, Fred and Gary, if you want to introduce yourself and go ahead and start.
My name is Fred Wilson from Mergantia Wilson Architects.
I'm Gary Shoemaker, Shoemaker Design Buildings.
Wanted to kind of walk through the architectural elements of the submission that we've created. As we all know, this is the vacant lot at 917. It's approximately 50 feet by 330 feet in length. It's the narrowest lot on the block. The site has been vacant for a number of years. I will point out a few of the characteristics of the block as we're going through. There was actually, at one time, pushed back a little bit farther back in here, though, that the original home that was here was a flat roof, somewhat contemporary structure that had been demolished a number of years ago, and has, as I mentioned, remained empty for a while. These are the prevailing sort of lines of the, and we're going to go over a few of the standards of how we analyze it, but the eastern line is the average line of all the front setbacks that run along, and the western line is the line that runs along on the within 250 feet of it. These little outliers, if you will, these three kind of appendages, I feel that the wall, if you will, of the facade runs along here, which is how we established where the facade of our building was established. I feel these are the outliers, the garages and the two-story garage and living. I feel Harry's structure is sort of an anomaly. It was the first home built, but I feel that he has pushed forward much more than the rest of the context of the site. The site, what we're doing is, the word as of right has come up, and what we're meaning by that is that we do not need any zoning variations for the property. This is the buildable footprint of the site per the zoning. We're doing a 5-foot setback on the north and south The building steps back, this is that line that I was talking about that we're trying to align up. We did step back in deference to the lower garage that's to our south, and then we brought the building back in with a courtyard that comes through here. The other thing that there was a comment about, at one time we did have window wells for daylight into the lower levels. We do not have any window wells that are encroaching into the side yards. The facade, I'll show you in the future, we have simplified it so that this is all now stucco. In deference to you, Elliot, from a previous submission, we've eliminated all the wood siding, so we're going to essentially stone. We have a natural cleft stone that runs along the base. We have stucco and stucco. There's a stone spine that runs through the center of the house. That's what this is, which is a fireplace chimney, and these are mechanical flues. That stone spine does show up then on the interior courtyard. We then have stucco that completes the rest of it, and then we have metal-clad bronze windows. Elliot, do you have your materials? So this is actually the stone. It's kind of a natural cleft ledge stone. This will be the stucco color here. Okay, let's do the gymnastics. And these are the brown clad, the color of the brown clad windows. So we actually went from the 4 materials down to 3 in terms of and we feel that, again, we'll get into that with the standards, but we felt that was a common sort of palette that happens on the block. So the height of the building, this height right here is 31'6", and the height right here is 33 feet in terms of the step back area. This height right here is 21 feet, where the balcony is up on the front. So this portion is pushed back. You can see where it's pushed back here on the facade. This is the north facade, and critical to this, these are the condensers up on the roof. The actual generator is 8 feet off of the property line, and the condensers are 11 feet off of the property line. They are hidden, that's why they're dotted in here. You do not see from anywhere on the block or in the neighboring. And these are showing up on the north side. This is the rendering that shows it kind of as you're walking. I have a second shot that shows it as you're walking past. Elliot, again, you mentioned what is this element. What I failed to tell you earlier is that aligns with the horizontal band on this building next to us as a horizontal element, and then it aligns with the window heads on the dormers. The idea is with the horizontal windows is to actually stretch the facade as much as we can, because we are in a very narrow lot with the 50-foot lot, so we try to do the horizontality to utilize that to our advantage. You're also seeing on here the sort of materials of the stucco and the stone down at the bottom. But this is actually a true photo of how this will feel in the block. This is from the other direction. This element here then steps down to align with the ridge of the front portion of this, but you can see the ridges in the back is where our facade lines up with that. You can see the stone material here running up as the spine, and then you see the stone at the base of the building. We do have a etched glass garage door to lighten it, and then these are the horizontal windows that run across. You can see in this, that's a small drawing, but you can, where that line is right there, and then the line is right there. That's where that shows the context of those alignments. The house is actually about 5,300 square feet without the garage. The garage is up on the front. It is a 4-bedroom house. There are 3, this is a 13 by 10.5 kids bedroom, 13 by 10.5 kids bedroom. There's a craft room up here in the front. This is the master suite. So there's a master bedroom, bathroom and closets. This is a home office and then a laundry. This is the first floor. What we are doing is we flip the house and have the main living up on the second floor. This is a central stair core that basically bisects the whole home. This is the sort of entry sequence. When you come in, you come up the stairs this way and are presented with the spine that runs along. This is an outdoor courtyard for the kids to play. They have 2 young children. This is then the 4th bedroom, the guest room. There is a playroom up on this floor, and then we have a music room here. And then the idea, the concept is that this is a big lofted space, if you will, along the back with kitchen, family room, serving piece, and then dining room on this bay, and then some outdoor space for views of the lake. These are this shows you that is the 8-foot setback to the generator, and then these are the compressors, so it's 11 feet. Here's the property line up here, and as I mentioned, they're sunk into the structure. This is the fireplace flues from the family room kitchen area, and then these are all the mechanical flues that come up through here. This is just a comparison that it actually simplifies. This is what we presented the last time. This is wood siding. That was a natural wood siding. We removed that, so you can see that it's here. We brought the building down slightly in terms of the height. And then it's a little aggressive on how your slide is. It's very smooth stucco. That's almost like a plaster finish. And then this shows the difference here that, again, where we had the siding has been removed, and this is now all one material. Same thing with this, it's all now one material. Stone is still in the center and in the center. And then you can see again here, the wood has been removed here, it's all stucco. The wood has been removed here, and it's all stucco, and again, we brought the building down slightly. So, any questions for the architectural part before we get into the standards that you would have for me?
Quick points of clarification on what Fred's presented thus far.
All right. He said that it's going to snow.
Probably still a little bit more. You don't slide this from.
We don't.
Doesn't matter. It'll be a surprise. In some of our preparations, we had an opportunity to have some more direct conversations with staff, and the recommendations that we spend a little time addressing each of these standards that's relevant to the project. So the first slide that we have here is with reference to standard number 1, which is height. We want to point out the average height of the structures along Edgeburn Court, which was surveyed a year or so ago by a professional land surveyor. The average height along Edgeburn Court is 33 feet 4 inches. Our structure maxes out at 33. There were several conversations about the average height. This datum line shows that average height. We want to point out that due to the history and the development of this block, many of these structures, which we now consider historic and contextual, predate the zoning ordinance and the preservation ordinance. Therefore, it would not be possible to build homes of this height any longer. We feel that the transition as we've made between the high ridge of this home and the proposed home to the houses on the south end is a modest transition between those things. If you notice that these heights, the heights of the chimneys, as these structures taper downward, are in keeping with this house and this house being the anomalies. Those two houses also came arguably after the preservation ordinance. And all 3 of these homes were subject to zoning variations at the time that the alterations were made to them. So, The other piece to point out is that the tallest homes on Edgemere Court, including the east and west side, top out at around 38 feet for some of the northern houses, and approximately 43 feet to the top of the chimneys on many of these houses. So most of these larger, grander structures that create the ordinance will dwarf any of these houses and make it difficult with a 35-foot height restriction to approach those in terms of contextual height. We feel that staying below this line and establishing that as like that is an appropriate response to the standard of height. This slide, I think you also take a look at this, the highlighted sections indicate the heights of these houses, with these houses at 900 being the highest. And this house in particular, which is directly across the street from ours, is 36 feet 4 to the top of the pyramid. It's also noted that all of these building heights are taken from the curb line from the sidewalk. So in reference to the standard of height, this house is well within context and below the average height of the block, and well below the average height of the most immediately contextual structure on the block. To the point of standard number 2, the proportion of facades. The proportion of this facade uses 3 principal materials in order to define the scale and proportion of the overall massing. As Fred mentioned, we have encouraged them to employ smooth finished stucco, which is a common material on this block. Most of these houses incorporate some form of it, if not large panels of masonry. Large panels of smooth stucco on this house are in keeping with that rhythm along the house. The use of large panels of glass and seam-based limestone, again, are common materials and common uses of proportion on this block. If you look at the proportion of these facades, these are large, mostly 2- and 3-story masses facing the street wall. As Fred also mentioned, we have intentionally stepped back and modulated the facade of this house. Just as it steps down in height, it steps back in its facade in order to respond to what has, over the course of time, happened to these structures, which is an additive process where they become longer, shorter, creeping forward of that average setback line. So we've also incorporated the use of the horizontal banding of glass and window openings, which is also common throughout these homes along Edgemere. If you look at the proportion of most of these, if you look at the proportion of the way the windows are aligned and the gangs of windows on the predominant houses, the garage doors, and the bands and groupings of windows, you'll see that these things are often used to create holes and proportions in these facades. You can see it in particular 900, which is across the street and to the south. The large, tall clerestory window is a gang of roughly 9 paneled windows. We feel that the use of the subdivided large panes of glass is also in keeping with that use of proportion through the glaze and frame windows. The properties visually rated this site, as I say, utilize similar architectural methods to define the facades and the proportions, particularly the use of modular stone, brick, limestone. We have, as Brent showed you the sample a moment ago, seam-faced or cleft-faced stonework on this house would maintain the pilotis or the lower baseboards in keeping with the pedestrian scale that's used in many of these houses, including the house immediately next door, which is all painted gray. So not only is the white and light tone of the large panel of stucco on this house in keeping with a structure that would be immediately adjacent to it as a white mass on the street, it also makes use of the proportion of the masonry joints in that. So when we talk about the proportion of facades, we also note that in the standards, a non-conforming lot is subject to adherence or its contribution to the district as a whole. And I think that can't be lost here. The district is much larger than this particular block. And if you look throughout the district, you'll see that many of the houses, in particular the ones that are immediately adjacent to it, being about half a block north of the entrance to Edgemere, this structure, having recently received a preservation award, uses large expanses of horizontal glass to define the banding and proportion of this facade. This project, which this body has recently approved, Also, I wasn't present at that, but I'm assuming that the banding of this, the bottom of the structure was either stucco or stone, but again, using large panels of a single material and large strips of glass. The house across the street using large coursing of glazed openings to define those bands. You can see as diagrammed in this, the horizontality and the use of glass to define these proportions of the facade is not an uncommon use of these techniques and these materials. It also should not go without saying that the houses that we reference, at least in this slide, all exhibit flat roofs and strong horizontal lines. All of these are within the historic district, many of them listed as contributing, and many of them having received either recent approval from this board or preservation, award recognition for their designs. Slide number 3, our standard number 3, proportion of openings. Again, we have surveyed each of these facades to highlight the proportion of glass that opening in this. Again, this is modern. This structure, in keeping with innovative, contemporary, modern design, is very, very glass oriented. I think we highlighted, if you'll look at the highlighted sections, these are houses that are similar in proportion of glass to facade on this block in particular. And again, we can look at the context of the rest of the district and see that, as you might imagine, many of these houses exhibit large percentages of glass to solid relations up in the front. In particular, the houses across the street, 900, the house across the street, the more contemporary house directly across, the large stucco house across the street as well, all exhibit high percentages of glass proportions to openings. So we feel that our use of glass in large openings is also in keeping with the character and the intent of the standard for proportions to openings. It is in keeping with many of the visually adjacent properties, and I think clearly in keeping with the aggregate of the related visual properties within the district itself. Standard number 4, the rhythms of solids and voids in the facade. Fred spoke briefly about the proportions and the modulation of these facades. The two diagrams that we've generated here show the section of the house as it relates to the property immediately to the north. Again, the zoning setback and the ordinance and the wall of continuity has been established as this line, which falls in keeping with the rest of the structures going north and south on the east side of the street. The west side doesn't have any outliers. They seem to be all kind of marching in lockstep along that side. As you can see, the house immediately to the north is way out of context. It is the anomaly. It should not go without being said that that house would not be permitted under the current ordinance or zoning today, so should be considered an existing non-conforming condition. Therefore, we have set the facade, the primary facade at the back line. The front facade, as it sneaks forward, addresses the house further to the south, and you see that garage structure. Again, these being the setback lines, this particular structure required a zoning variation for the construction of that one-story addition. And that was done through this body with approval from the Preservation Commission. So our structure, again, keeping the as-of-right terminology and zoning setback, sets behind the two average setbacks and within what would be continued what should be considered the wall of continuity among the higher second-story structures, which I think we would all agree are defined by structures to the north, which predate this ordinance and the zone. So, I think that's our last one. Found it. Okay. With regard to standard number 5, the rhythm of spacing and structures on the street, Fred mentioned this as he introduced the project. The red line, the red dash line, is the average setback of the entire block, which we certainly had every intention of respecting. You can see that the front porch portion engages that line, which is the lowest elevation portion. The lightly hatched area is the open porch in front of the setback. This line is effectively the second story setback that we believe is the wall continuity visually as it runs down here. The blue line is the average setback within 250 feet. That's the letter of the law for the zoning review. As you can see, we have intentionally pushed this house back to be in conformance with the setback average of the entire block, recognizing that this house will become contextual within the rest of that block. If ever in the future this house were to be modified or removed, we believe that setback is the one that's been predominantly defined by these structures already, and this house would not affect that setback in the future. In terms of the rhythm and spacing of structures on the street, the taller main body of this house is intended again to align visually with the larger homes, to which its second story volume and roof line are visually related. Again, as you walk up and down this alley, the renderings that we showed you earlier indicate that these higher structures are the ones that this structure is predominantly related to. The scale and rhythm to which this property is related consists of wide, grand structures. This project proposes to use the materials of massing and glazing configurations intended to bridge the variation between these examples of modest low structures to the south, maintaining the design integrity of the unique and appropriate structure of this site in its visually related and district related context. Again, this is a non-contributing lot, and there is more consideration that should be given to this lot than just the immediate and visually adjacent properties. This house should serve as context to the larger district. And there's the slide we were talking about. So as you see here, the massing in context with the adjacent houses continues that higher roof line. As you see here, the larger houses, as you see them moving up and down the block, maintain a visual relationship with those higher roof lines. I think it's clear in these drawings that these setbacks and the transparency of this house take away a lot of the weight and the concern about the mass and proportion of this house as an imposing presence on the street. Number 6, the rhythm of entrance porches and projections. It's important to note here that these houses predominantly feature modest entries. A lot of them feature ornate porticos, ornate entrances. This house in particular has, and I can look at the certificate, survey information to clarify it, but this is a large flat roofed 2.5-story structure that projects forward of the house. The data known, but it's clearly an addition which subordinates the front entry with a major garage door entry on the front. This house obviously has a modest front door tucked into the corner with a predominant front garage door. This structure, again, the projecting garage bay in the front, making the garage door the front feature. The only house on this side of the block which features a formal entry identifiable from the street is the house immediately next door. In our design and development, we have created the C-shaped modest overhang, which creates a small bit of rain protection, identifying that as the front entry and a door at the rise of the front porch. In keeping with arguably what that entrance would be, and arguably what that entrance would be, which is tucked well back with a 3-car garage and a large addition in the front. The garage door here has been intentionally selected to mimic the windows and doors, allowing it to not be quite as prominent on the front of the house as the adjacent structures, which feature much more ornate and identifiable garage doors. It's difficult to mask the garage door, but we have done it trying to use similar materials and to be consistent with that. These houses at the end, again, they're not particularly They're not particularly grand, as are the ones on the north end, and making the transition between these granite houses and these more modest houses in the end. These houses feature very prominently as the most visible piece, a garage. Garage doors as you walk up and down the alley, up and down the street, and low slung and small openings on the facades. So we have again attempted to make our house the transition between the identifiable front entries and these structures. So again, if you look at the proportions, the rhythm of these things, the predominant rhythm and predominant projection on these structures are all garages. We've identified the garage clearly. The setback up here allows this to project forward very slightly. We've done it for a couple of reasons, but have intentionally kept the garage pulled back a little bit to allow it to not be the thing in the front yard. Again, going back to the larger context to which this house would be visually related throughout. Again, the vertical masses with the garage door openings and the predominant alignments of these vertical facades is a common tool used in a lot of the development of some existing and some modified structures within the district. Number 7, the relationship with materials and texture. Again, we've taken time to calculate the proportions of the facades. If you notice, the highlighted are structures and proportions relative to openings, glass, stone that are within a reasonable percentage matching what we've already proposed, showing that mathematically this house is within the context of this neighborhood to the immediately adjacent context. It should be noted that the Lakeshore Historic District consists of a very wide range of materials on edge board at the smaller scale and also a larger scale of the entire district. You can find stucco and stone on every block in most every house in these tones and these finishes. This isn't an uncommon material. We believe we have adapted it and used it in a contemporary or stylistically appropriate fashion for a house of this style. We talked about the adjacent structures. They vary greatly in style north to south and across to the west. Again, looking at the proportions of stucco to cladding to stone, within a short walk you would find every one of these materials on the adjacent houses. So contextually and in terms of compatibility, the use of these materials is very much in keeping with what this neighborhood is accustomed to. Again, you notice the highlighted sections have identified the structures that are proportionally relevant to the development of this structure in terms of glass, and solids, and voids, and materials and textures. Roof shapes and roof-mounted equipment. If you notice on the slide, we grayed out the structures that do not feature necessarily compatible features. It should be noted that the additions the structures we've noted here all feature prominently flat roofed additions or flat roofed major elements that make up the composition. The 2.5-story addition on the front of this house is a large flat roofed structure. The prominent entry porch, one of the only ones on the east side of the street, features a flat roofed structure as the primary object in the front. 900, which is on the end and is a quite beautiful house, features not only a flat roof solarium that's all glass, but also an enclosed sleeping porch that was enclosed as a flat roof structure with glass on it. So moving down, clearly the house across the street, the more contemporary house in the late 60s when it dates, is clearly a flat roof structure. The house adjacent to it features side porches, as you can see here. Here features side porches and prominent elements, again, flat roofed in terms of the visibility and the visual cues on that house. So our contention in terms of roof shapes, roof mounted equipment, we conceal all of the roof mounted equipment. It's not visible from any direction. And there is already a precedent for prominent volumetric moves and prominent features on the facades of these houses that permit or encourage the use of flat roof structure. And again, I think we've mentioned it earlier, within the district, there are several notable, contributing, and by this body award-winning examples of successful flat roof structures within the context of the historic district. I want to, we've talked about this many times in our design meetings or our consultations with clients. The Lakeshore Historic District is clearly the most diverse, innovative, and evolutionary districts we have in the community. It features the oldest and most prominent houses and some of the most modern and contemporary ones. I think this house, the proposed house, makes use of a lot of the materials that are traditional and belong in this neighborhood, in this community, and in this district, but also fits in very well with what we see clearly is an evolution and a successful integration of these stylistic and proportional uses. Walls of continuity, we've mentioned this several times, that this visually is clearly the wall of continuity along the side. The houses to the south or the houses to the north, I'm sorry, are tall grand structures with predominantly flat facades. While they do have sloping roofs, the major volumes of these houses are clearly along this line. This garage extension is an anomaly. Again, we've talked about this a moment ago. This house extends far forward of what the average setback is, and beyond the point that this house would be permitted to be constructed in the current zoning ordinance anyway. These structures, the shaded sections on all of these drawings on the east side indicate the low objects or the low massing elements. These are those garage extensions we spoke about earlier, and the darker masses represent the higher gabled second stories and rising structures of those adjacent houses. So again, the wall of continuity, we believe, is along this red line, and as we talked about in the renderings, looking from the street view, from the sidewalk, you can clearly see that it does recede from those front facades, but pick up on the rhythm of the houses to the north and the south. Number 10, the scale of the structure. Again, we've talked about the heights of this house and how it falls within the average. We've shown the massing, it's called the open air space, that would indicate the scale of the structure. The structures down here are built lot line to lot line, with very minimal gap. It should be noted that the structures up here, many of these houses are less than the allowable side yard setback. So these are very narrow gaps between the houses down here. I believe it's this one that sits within what would be the required side yard setback today. So again, this block much of it having predated the current ordinance, many of the things that have happened on these houses and even on these houses would be permitted under the current standards of zoning or preservation. If you see that we have maintained as much space between the structures here and here as we can. If I'm not mistaken, this particular house was recently granted a certificate of approval for a ramp that's built right up to that 5-foot setback as it is. This would split that difference with a fence. We feel that the rhythm between these structures as it moves north is in keeping and continues to allow that. On the narrowest side of our structure, we have introduced the courtyard, which allows a little bit more breathing room visually and for light to penetrate between those two structures. The directional expression of the facades, again, Fred mentioned that we've tried to do a couple of things. We have a narrow lot, and based on the scale of the houses here and the maximum heights, we can't build a tall house here that would be comparable to the grander structures to the north. So we have chosen instead to build a more horizontally oriented structure with the bands of glass. And as you look at the blue diagrams, you see that clearly the directional expression of these facades in terms of how the glazing works is a strong horizontal element. The yellow indicates the vertical elements. We have picked up on that by exposing the spine of this house. The house, for example, on 900 down here has very tall 2.5 to 3-story gable ends facing the street. I think we believe that the nod to the verticality in this is important, but a skinny lot and a tall, narrow house is not what the client is asked for. So we've attempted to pick up on the horizontality of these glazing bands throughout. You can see them also across the street, particularly on the one directly across that uses a series of very tall casement windows around the second story to find light in that second story. I think Fred also mentioned that the rain screen that occurs on the front of the house here is intentionally aligning with the windowsill and the head of the adjacent house. Again, picking up on the idea that we can transition between these higher structures and what would be these lower, more discrete structures to the south. Again, looking to the larger context of the community, of the district, you can obviously see that we're pointing out that these are very horizontally oriented expressions for these flat roof structures. Obviously, there's no original qualities. Again, this is a non-contributing vacant site, so the standards would point you to a larger context than just the immediately and visually related structures. Obviously, and I think everyone says this, if you find the arrowheads, we stop construction and we put them in a box, all that good stuff. Innovative design, I think there's a lot of discussion about what that means and what that is. I think that we don't interpret that necessarily as a contemporary design, but we do think that we have achieved a modest home using innovative design strategies and innovative uses of proportions and glazing to make use of a very narrow site on a prominent lakefront location. So we believe that this certainly falls within that standard. Obviously, this is not a new addition. And new construction, clearly, the owners came to Fred and the team and discussed with us early in this project that they really wanted a concise house with a clear statement and stylistic vision. So the team has worked hard to find something that is of its own period, of its own time. It no longer features or conflicts itself with multiple styles. It's been consistent all the way around. And we point to structures like these, in particular the one that was recently approved several blocks to the north, as using a very distinctive and consistent style. Obviously, there's no signage on this.
I just wanted to make one comment for our review purposes. This project is zoning compliant.
That's correct.
Versus as of right, because I keep hearing that term, but it is zoning
Yes,
compliant.
yes.
So-
Yes. There are no special concessions or requirements
Right.
for this one.
Any points of clarification here? Otherwise, we'll move on to the speakers that have signed up. And first is Harry, well, I know I always mispronounce your name, Harry Lawrence.
Just think of romance, and it's
Oh,
Lawrence.
okay, Harry Lawrence. There we go.
Just think of romance, Lawrence, you look at
There we go. I got it. And I would ask all the speakers tonight if we can, given time and whatever, if someone makes a point that you already made, or has already been made, if you could move on and come up with something new. So, all right.
Hi, my name is Harry Lawrence. I live at 919 Edgemere Court, which is directly north to the applicant. And I've been coming here for 2.5 years now with respect to this application. And at the very start, back in May of 2016, the commission has always asked for a model, but the applicant would never deliver one. So I thought after the last meeting that we'll just go out and have one made. So we went ahead, based off of the application. I had some architectural model makers put this together with a 3D printer, and they put this whole floor plan together, and it gives you a much better understanding of how this really, really lines up. If you take a look, this is my house. Now, this is a landmarked house. This house here is a landmarked house. So the applicant's house is flanked by a landmarked house and a landmarked house. So is it the responsibility of this commission to protect landmarked homes? And if so, if you allow this, proportionately speaking, it's going to render this home and this home as teardowns are really unsaleable. I mean, take a look at the mass that this occupies. Now, the house to the north of me, which everybody says, how did that ever happen? Whoever approved that is here, so it creates this whole canyon effect onto my north. Once this is put up, it'll create a greater canyon. So, with respect to this home, with the application, it really hasn't done that much difference since the last application was submitted. They came down fractionally on the height, but because this is a flat roof, it lines up with the very peak of my roof. However, by it being flat, it creates much more mass. In addition, it just totally dwarfs the house to the south of it. Because this roof line here is only 26 feet, that's the maximum, and then it's tiered as you go from the garage to the back of the house. So I think it's like around 18 feet, and then it drops down to another 18 feet. So essentially that's almost double what this is, if you take out the 26-foot part of the house. They make mention of the space to the north of them. That's my space. That's my space. So if you go ahead and see where this is bordered up here, it's going to be right lot line to lot line. So it'll be totally jammed in there. So they make mention of these homes to the south as being somewhat insignificant, but they're very significant. The people bought these homes and redid them with the idea that they're going to be in an historic district, that their homes are going to be protected by the rules of preservation and the standards of preservation, and now they're being threatened. So you have a landmark house here, a landmark house here, a landmark house across the street, and a landmark house over here. So I pray to this commission that they will consider that when making the evaluation of how things are going to pan out here, because of this canyon effect here. It's just way too large. We put that into the packet, so
Yes,
I can pull it up on the screen.
We've all seen it.
Oh, you have seen it?
Yes.
Excuse me, I'm Judy Lorenz.
That's my wife. That's
I just-
Mrs. Romance Lorenz.
I just wanted to show the commission the view of the south end of Edgemere Court, what people will be looking at from also Sheridan Road, since Edgemere Court is one-way, it's cut off. From the south end of Edgemere Court, you will be looking at
The entire
this,
side.
which looks like a bunch of train boxcars because of the height that was lowered because of the lack of the pitched roof. The mass of this is going to be substantial. And that's what's concerning, I think, to everyone on the block, including the people across the street that have homes similar.
Now,
Okay, thank you.
oh, and show them from the lakeside how it looks. I mean,
We're-
you've seen it. Okay, I don't want to dwell on
We've
it.
we've seen it,
Okay.
and frankly, that's outside of our purview.
Now, a lot of conversation was given to the district about standards within the district, but I believe, from what I've read, and perhaps I'm wrong, that the guidelines are, quote, the properties to which they're visually related. that means immediately. That means the block. It doesn't mean what's 2 blocks down or a half a block north or 3 blocks west. It means what's right here, what's visually related. And then Mr. Schumacher just spoke to that they couldn't build a smaller house here. Well, let me tell you, there was a little Mediterranean house here for many, many years, up until 2006 when they tore it down. So, and it sat very nicely on this lot. It's the narrowest lot, but it was a cute little Mediterranean house, and it sat very nicely there. The other thing I wanted to ask the commission is, do you undertake impervious surface? Is that in zoning?
But that would be a zoning matter.
Okay.
And
And the house,
Are you almost ready? Here.
ready for what?
Oh, are you almost finished? I wasn't sure if you were
Are you
finished.
gonna give me that bell again?
Yeah, I might do that.
All right. And the house that was referenced about a block and a half, about 2 blocks north on Lakeshore Boulevard, the same type of Malibu style house with the flat roof and the horizontal lines, everything else. Well, that house is substantially shorter than this house. The house that he was citing that went through, that got some type of an award or what, it's a lot shorter. But this is how it really looks in real life. These are not, these are the dimensions. This was taken off of the application, and there it be. So if you need me to roll it around or see the back and front, it's all here. You can see top, bottom, front, and back. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mary. Next is Jen Rothenberg.
May I cede my time to someone else?
No.
No? Okay.
But next on the list is Andrea and David Rappaport, or Hart Rappaport.
Hi, David Rappaport, 930 Edgemere Court. Andrea's been here. We don't have a lot to add other than several statements were made about our house being directly across the street from the 917. It is the truth. Our house is two houses to the north. So, for example, we're I don't know if the model shows this, but basically, orient. This is us over here. Okay, we're the contemporaries, so the height comparisons, the other comparisons are just incorrect. I don't know why. You should know.
Okay, thank you. Mary Ann McGrath from 943 Edgemere.
Yes, hi, I'm Mary Ann McGrath. I live down at the very end of the street. It's right over here. The only thing I really want to add are a couple of things. One is that I thought obviously the presentation from the architects were very persuasive, but using things like means, mean height and mean setback is a little bit skewed and biased, because the reason why so many people are here for Edgemere Court tonight is because of 9/11. And so 9/11 skews the fact that it is so tall and it's so big and it's so far forward, skews those numbers when you're figuring out averages.
925.
925.
925, okay.
The new one.
What we call the Taco Bell house in the middle.
Yeah, we know what you mean.
And then just the second thing is really to address standard 10, which is more context. We all know NIMBY, not in my backyard. In the sense, when you look at this house, it's kind of NIMSY, not in my side yard. I don't know anybody who would want to raise their hand and say that they want to be next door to this structure, especially on the north side where it is just a monolith. And, I really, I'm not affected by this directly, but I really feel badly for the people on each side, because they are just sitting next to a large structure that is permanent. And then my last comment, which is, I don't know if you addressed this issue, but one of the things we do find on the water is that sound carries. I live next to Lee Street Beach, and I can hear people who think they're having private conversations on Lee Street Beach in the middle of the night. And I would like to unhear them. But the issue with this house that worries me is that things like the generator and the air conditioner, and we think pool equipment will be out here somewhere, and especially on the roof. You know, my fear is that we'll all be hearing it. So anyway, those are my few comments.
Wouldn't you be hearing it if it was on the side of the house anyways, then?
Pardon me?
Wouldn't you still be hearing it if it was on the side of the house or something?
I don't know. We can certainly hear. I have a pool. I moved my pool equipment as far away from my neighbors as I could toward the beach. Sometimes if the pool equipment is not in perfect running order, I can hear the pool equipment from this house, the third house in. Yeah. So it is a, you know, sound is an issue, and I'm questioning, you know, the generators and the air conditioning units. And similarly, I have my air conditioning units over on this side of the house so that they don't bother other people.
Okay, thank you very much. Pauline Cortines-Shingan?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Pauline Kurtaga-Sheehan, and I speak to you as a lifelong Evanston resident, as the owner of a neighboring property, and as a licensed architect since 1990 and a member of the American Institute of Architects. I'm here regarding 917 Edgemere Court. While there are a number of complex issues to be addressed regarding preservation standards, which I trust to the expertise of the very qualified members of this commission, the one overwhelming issue is the relative bulk and height of this project relative to flanking landmark properties, and to the general historic nature of this very special block, to those visually related properties. While I appreciate the adjustments to the material surfaces made in the current design, and feel they are improvements, they are the first steps in the right direction. The proposed dwelling is defined by an uncharacteristic inverted floor plan unique to this block, placing bedrooms on the first floor and main living spaces on the second floor. With the first floor at 5 feet 0 inches above grade, the foyer elevation was lower, and the second floor at 18 feet 0 inches above grade. This is a 13-foot floor-to-floor dimension. Even with 2 or 3 feet of interstitial space for structure and mechanical, those results in 10-foot ceilings for a number of smaller private spaces, such as bedrooms and bathrooms. Given the room sizes shown, the ceiling heights are disproportionately high, like deep wells, and building sections have not been provided as part of this application, but I feel they affect the bulk of the building. This conflict between exterior expression and interior function is one of the anomalies leading to the overall excessive height. If these spaces were on the second floors as typical, such volume would not be unusual. The floor-to-floor height then is possibly excessive and placed to make reductions. Additionally, the first floor is elevated at 5 feet 0 inches above grade, which is, I believe, again, atypical for this neighborhood. While this may be intended to enhance lake views from both levels by boosting up the house, again, it is a possible source of the excessive height. No basement plans have been made available to us, but given windows indicated on the north elevation, we assume there are occupied spaces in the basement. I don't know if you said you removed those windows now?
There's no window.
There's no window wells, okay.
We do have the pool equipment down there, just to clarify. So.
Okay. So we assume there are occupied spaces in the basement, and if this is the case, at least one form of emergency egress must be provided, with more if there is more than one bedroom on this level. Window sizes indicated may not be adequate for such emergency egress, and there may be a future request for zoning variance to allow window wells within the minimum 5-foot setbacks, as the house spans lot line to lot line north and south. Again, without knowing what is planned for the basement, this is another opportunity to reduce the overall height of this building, as a 5-foot height above grade is excessive compared visually to neighboring properties. Indeed, the location of the second floor at 18 feet above grade is located well above the typical second floor, and with a roof height of over 30 feet, again, you've got finished ceiling heights of at least 10 feet and possibly more on the second floor, and again, this is a possible area for reduction. As the second floor of most dwellings on this block have lower ceiling heights, often contained within the volume of a sloped roof. Again, the inverted plan is uncharacteristic and perhaps the source of the excessive height. There are therefore at least 3 areas where the overall height of this building may be reduced without adversely affecting the function of these spaces. One of the properties cited as an example by the owners is the one up the street, the award winner, that has the main living space on the 2nd floor, like a piano nobile. But there I would point out that the ground level is notably muted and shorter, and it allows the expression of the 2nd floor as the major space to be expressed. And also it is much lower overall building height. So, I mean, I look forward to seeing a new house built on this block, and I welcome innovative design in general, and I hope that it will be possible to reach a happy solution, and I thank you for your time and careful consideration and your service to our community and upholding the standards we all agree to live by within this much beloved historic district.
Thank you, Colleen, and just for, as a point of clarification, we typically don't look at interior spaces, but the issues in terms of height.
Well, I think that they're reflecting the massiveness of the building, and so I feel like there's something that's inherently different about this particular inverted plan that might be making it difficult to adjust.
Great, thank you for your comments. Next is Philip, and I hope I don't mispronounce your name, Cryfield? Cryfield?
Yes, thank you.
If you could introduce yourself.
I'm Phil Cryfield. My wife Jackie and I own about 11 I'll just make a couple short comments. Everyone else has made virtually all the appropriate comments. First of all, there was a comment made about this being an ordinary, a modest house. It is a landmark house. Secondly, a comment was made about this commission approved an accessibility plan earlier this year. True. However, that is totally irrelevant to this discussion because it is totally invisible to the street. We selected it to be totally invisible on the street. It is behind a fence. We separated these two properties. It is hidden from the front. It's hidden from the back. We could have done it to the front yard. We could have done it through the garage. We selected not to do that. Third point is, while I understand it is not within your purview to deal with zoning issues, we're reserving our rights to contest the zoning analysis because we think there are some problems with that in relation to the unique nature of this community. And four, how do I say this? The commission has not considered the lake as a public way. We can test that. We understand that the commission has a legal opinion from the legal staff. We think it's wrong. And again, we have a legal opinion that says it's wrong. And we are reserving our rights to raise that issue in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Doug Gilbert. Welcome and thank you for making the trek.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Doug Gilbert. I'm a preservation architect and consultant based in Oak Park. And as just a very brief background, I was hired by the neighbors, or a number of the neighbors, at the time of the appeal that occurred in July to review the appeal documents and to write something to the city council, which I did. That's obviously not relevant here, but what is relevant is as part of that process, I reviewed the design proposal that I think, and your review comments and concerns from, I think it was your June meeting. And so I was asked by my clients to review the current proposal before you this evening and kind of compare that with your previous review and the changes they've made to see if there's any remaining issues and to kind of highlight a number of those. So if you would, and I'll try to be fairly brief because some of the speakers have already said a few things, but I'll go down through several of the standards that I think are still an issue based on your previous review. Number one is the height, and that it should be visually compatible with the properties to which it is visually related. And as has been noted, the issue here isn't just the height by a number and by a standard of an average. That's certainly of certain value, but it's also the context, the visual context that the standard requires you to look at, and that is the fact that almost all of the other properties on this block have sloped roofs. And so the height taken of all the other properties are going to be based on a roof that is receding away from the front elevation. This proposal is essentially a flat roof with parapet, and so there's a completely different kind of massing at play here than you would have with a sloped roof. So the height that's going to be perceived with this structure, even though it's just below, and they dropped it, I believe 6 inches, it's just below that median line, it's still going to have a visual impact on the neighborhood block here. Standard number 2 is the proportion of facades, the relationship of the width, the height of the facades, and this is somewhat related and has also been raised by a number of the other speakers. And I would point out that, again, it's the other houses have a massing and a height to a certain level, and then there's a sloped roof. And so, again, this having more of a flat elevation and a certain height, I think the 1 and 2 are kind of somewhat related, so I don't want to be too repetitive on that. Number 3 is the proportion of openings, the relationship of the width of height of windows, be compatible with properties to which it's visually related. And the applicant made note of and presented some examples both on the block and a few in the historic district that are outside the block, which I would consider the block to be the visual related properties. The issue, as I see it, isn't necessarily the window openings, and this is a contemporary design, so they're playing for larger openings versus, say, punched openings that you would see more typically in a historic house, but rather the subdivision of those window openings. They're using very large, essentially plate glass window types with sort of some minor divisions along the top and sides, but you're getting very large expanses of glass, which I don't see in any of the examples that they showed, both on the block and throughout the district. Even in some of the examples of the large bands of windows on some of the contemporary homes, both almost across the street and also throughout the district, those bands of windows openings are vertically subdivided to create a rhythm that is more in scale with the historic context around it. And I'm not seeing that on this particular proposal. I think it's something that would be relatively easy to address, but I'll leave that to the architects to figure that out. The other standard that was raised in your previous review would be number 10. Oh, I should say they did address the materials issues that you had raised, and it seems, in my opinion, that that's an adequate response to some of the concerns that you all raised. But number 10 is the scale of the structure, the size and mass of the structure, and again, that's somewhat related to standards 1 and 2, and I would point out once again that the massing of this structure, and I think you can see it actually quite well in the model, is really out of context with the other smaller scale and massings of the surrounding houses, even compared to what you seem to refer to as the Taco Bell house. That has a broken massing. Now it has a wider lot. It's been noted that this is the narrowest lot, so I can understand the challenges that the architect team faces here. But the massing is still quite significant compared to the surrounding context. Lastly, really, I'd like to address standard 14, your innovative design standard. And I'd like to first say that I'm really impressed that you have this. A lot of commissions and communities do not. And I actually think it's a wonderful thing. Although I do preservation architecture, I love contemporary architecture, and I think that it is appropriate to have compatible contemporary architecture in a historic district. But the key there is, and is in fact in your standard, is that it needs to be compatible. I don't think there's any issues that I've heard either from the commission or even from my clients that there's a concern about the design per se, the design style or character. It has to do with the issues of compatibility with the surrounding properties, the visual characteristics. And so I don't know that there's any call for changing the design. It's changing the aspects of the proposal, the height, the massing, some of the window divisions that would be more compatible than with the surrounding properties. So, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Doug. We also, as I mentioned earlier on, received a number of communications about this. The first was a communication from Commissioner Hacker, which is done essentially under our rules, Article 4.1G, regarding statements from commissioners, describing her issues specific to certain standards, and that's going to be a record, as will all of these communications. As part of this process, we also received 2 letters dated today. The first is from Leon H. and Donna M. Flerschinger, from 907 Edgemere, and they object to the proposed design based on appropriateness, context, and scale. A similar letter was received from Michael Arrington at 927 Edgemere Court, also dated today. We also received from the applicants a series of letters addressed to different aldermen and the city council. The first is from Tiffany Ferris and George DeMette, and on this letter there are 65 co-signers, which I won't read. Again, this will all be part of the record. Another letter in favor of the proposed application is from Margaret and Richard Slayton at 1112 Greenwood. Another one from Aaron at Fawn Studio. There's no last name there. Another one addressed to Eleanor Ravel from Andy and Jill Kidd. Another one from Donna Wang Sue. Again, these are all in favor of the proposal, or the application rather. Another from Jeff and Laura Jacobs. From William Ray at 1624 Wesley. And from Gillian and Leo Raish, I think is how it's pronounced, at 821 Hampton. With that,
Diane, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But I forgot that we have something that pulls up from the neighborhood position statement where we have 14 to 15 residents and owners of Edgemere Court signed off in support of this.
Yes,
and it's
you
up
did.
there. And in addition to that, none of the people, I mean, I know some of the people you mentioned, none of those people live on Edgemere Court or anywhere near it.
Right.
So, I mean, one of the
They
people
were-
that spoke before the city council, we came to learn later, lived in Wilmette.
Yeah. These are
So,
all.
I mean, they dragged them in from all over.
Yeah, these are folks that all provided letters
Right.
of support. So with that, Fred and or Gary, did you have any particular points that you want to address before we begin our conversation here?
No, I think.
Okay.
I think the only point we'd like to make, and while we appreciate the construction of the model, it's we disagree with the accuracy of the model and the renderings they've used. It creates solid masses and projections that don't exist in this proposal. So I think I would ask that this body take the provision of these things by the neighbors with a grain of salt. They haven't been reviewed for our accuracy and don't match the model and the renderings that we've prepared.
Okay.
They came from your application. That's where they came from. I gave
Thank you
the
very much.
modeler your application to make this work.
I don't think
Okay, I'm
we
sorry.
need to discuss that issue right now. Pauline, you want to comment?
Oh, I just would point out that the letter that you received from Meg and Richard Slayton, the Slaytons are the people who sold this lot to
Yes.
the Sabos, and they may have some kind of,
special interest in this
Oh,
regard.
thank you for that observation. Okay, with that, commissioners, do you have some questions here for the applicants?
Why didn't you guys build a model like this 2.5 years ago?
We felt that the renderings, when we talked to some of the board and some staff, they said, show us the rendering, how it really feels as you're walking down the street. So that's what we produced, because the renderings that we show have the landscape and the context, and they're digitally perfect. That's exactly how you would perceive the building, where I don't see, and again, I think some of the massing that is shown in the model and in these renderings here are deceiving, let's put it that way.
I mean, like if I look at these, it makes me want to vote against the house because it looks like a block of cheese and there's no windows. But that whole north side is covered in windows, right? So it's a little bit like it's not really accurate. But like even the simplest things that come before us have like a model. Like Stuart built that model tonight for his,
I built many of those.
Yeah, so it's like, I don't understand why you guys, with all this money and everything you've done, like you didn't build a model for this extremely complicated house.
This is actually
They just wanted a massing model, that's why
digitally
it's
installed into this space. So this landscape exists, this landscape exists. You can actually see, this is how much you see of the site. This rendering, you see the entire site. If you go up and look at the rendering up close, you can actually see, if you got the perspective in there?
Like what you're looking at?
Yeah. Go the other way, yeah. Keep going. Right there. Go to the next one. Go to
In
the
just
next
a
one. Right
minute,
here.
yeah.
You see, this is the site. This is what you see. There is land. These are here.
But like this is making it look like this house is like 50 feet
But
deep.
that's
Do you know what I mean?
digitally accurate. This is exactly how you will see it. We were told to show what it would look like as you're walking down the block.
I don't think that's true, because I walk down the street all the time, and I know that, like, based on that, if I'm walking north on Edgemere on the east side of the street, I'm not just gonna see this little, this makes the house look tiny. Do you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
not, it's huge.
It's not tiny at all.
So that's what I'm saying, like, I don't know why you guys didn't build a model, because that seems like it would make things so much simpler for all of us, because this is super complicated. I actually don't know what's right or wrong, because it's.
No, but like this structure right here, this is what I'm saying. This that's hanging out right here is an open air structure. It's not a solid mass like this. This right here, this is the inverse of what we actually have. We have the second floor steps back and the ground floor steps forward. So that's what I'm saying about the accuracy of this.
Right.
Again, I feel that what we have shown here is you cannot manipulate the depth of that.
I guess for such a complicated issue, that would have simplified it, and you guys are amazing architects, like you couldn't have done a model for this?
They were asked 2.5 years, they've been asked 5 times.
Yeah, excuse me, ma'am, yes, you had a question or a comment, and could I get your name and address?
I do, I'm Jackie Crickdale, and I just have a comment about this particular picture, it's saying it's digitally accurate. It is not digitally accurate because Mr. Lorenz, and Harry can talk about this better than I, has a quite large, beautiful 200-year-old, whatever, giant maple tree right at the corner, back corner of his house. And actually this house, because of its height, is going to push up into the crown of that tree. And they're going to have to just cut half the tree off because, and they're not even showing that tree. What you're seeing.
Actually, if you look carefully, it's
No,
a tree.
no.
It's not there.
Gary,
It's not
I'm
there.
sorry, that tree is farther back. That tree is not at the corner of his house. That is a tree that is farther back on the lot that is showing in this picture. So somehow or other, it's been photoshopped out, a giant tree on the corner of Gary's house, which will be encroached upon by this house because of its height. It's gonna.
Okay, thank you. And Harry, one quick comment.
Okay,
and
yes,
then I
the
want to make
reason
sure
I-
the commissioners have a chance to
Okay, I'm
answer
sorry.
their questions.
But I just wanted to clarify for the commissioners that the reason I just did a mass model is because that's what the commission asked for, a simple mass model. Had you asked for more detail, I would have done more detail.
Okay.
But that's the reason why it's there before you now, is because you just asked for a simple mass model. And you've been asking for it for 2.5 years.
Great, thank you. commissioner questions?
Questions or comments?
Oh, whatever.
Well, I've been quoted so often tonight, I wasn't sure I was supposed to say anything. And Fred, you seem to be directing everything to me, and I didn't think I said that much at the last meeting. Apparently, I was the only one that went down through the standards. Is there a way that we can go back through your little sort of analysis of the standards, which are the ones that have yellow and all the rest? Because I think it's just easier. I think they're on two different acts.
Yeah, they are.
Unfortunately, Breakpoint probably would have been better.
Which
I think we have to, because it's those early ones that everybody's been talking about.
Which standard are
Let's start with
Why don't
one.
you, yeah, just go back to, it
Which
says
is
packet 1A.
Sorry about that. Just keep going. Sorry, it's number 20.
17 standard one.
It just takes 19.
Yeah, it just needs to load.
Okay, I brought it up the last time. I noticed that Julie, in her letter for those who haven't read it, our commissioner has.
And it was also provided to these folks.
Okay, to them, but I don't know about the people in the audience.
No,
So.
yeah.
And thankfully, Doug Gilbert still?
Yes.
Yes.
You raised the same issue, which is the same one I did, which is what is height in reality? And height is really not just somewhere there. It's nice to draw that line, and I think many of us have been arguing that it's really that line because of the receding roof. Or most of these roofs are sloped back. It's always been the same. I mean, going from 32 feet to 31.6 or whatever you did this time, I'm not even sure how that came about. Really didn't seem to have any effect on it. And so I think that it's still, that notion of using a two-dimensional view, is one of the things, that whether I even looked at this SketchUp model here or that one there, you start to really recognize what's going on with the actual mass and the height. So, and can we go to proportion, which I think is number standard two. You got a bunch of them that your proportion of facades is interesting because if you look at some of those houses where you've outlined the red, and this comes up later on, occasionally you've gone all the way up, and I would probably argue that on most of these, it's really this horizontal. Not necessarily that, everybody's Taco Bell house, I don't care about that. Harry's house, on this one, I'm not sure, again, because this roof, some of these roofs recede, you could argue that it's really this rectangle. They're all horizontal rectangles, and then I have this vertical. And its only mate, if I can call it that, is this one.
Elliot, sorry.
And you can go to the next one, because I think a lot of them appear on that
But
one.
what I would say right here is this, what we outlined were the flat facades that are in the neighborhood. So this height is up at the same height with where we are. Everybody says, let's not talk about this building. It's 2 doors north.
Oh, I know.
So it is 42 feet tall. And then I look at Harry's building, which has, okay, yes, there is a gutter line here, but these dormers are maybe 2 feet back from this facade. I look at the peak of these gables,
as being the height of that structure.
Those dormer faces
And I'm
are
gonna,
in the
I'm gonna
front
beat it to
facade.
death, but, you know, even when we talked about models, and Harry, I don't know what anybody said 2.5 years ago, because I don't even remember that. All I actually would have expected last time we talked about it was a model that might have only had 3 buildings, not the entire block. If we'd only been seeing your building, Harry's, and the one on the other side, whether you wanted to include the others, that alone, for Carl, or anybody else, would have demonstrated what's really going on with this building. No offense to the people who live further up the block, but I'm not gonna worry about the one down here at the end. I mean, it is the context, and I absolutely agree with the notion that the context is this block and not the district, which encompasses a lot of others. But I would have said it's these 3 buildings that we're really talking about. The new one being plunked in between these other 2. And that's what everybody's been looking at, and that's what everybody's been arguing about. I think we can drift down the block and say, look at that, but I think now you're starting to drift away in context. And I am a contextualist, whether I like it or not. So I think it becomes very important. Can we keep going, because I don't want to keep this forever. I think it's
because I wanna
number,
make sure
I want to go
everybody gets
to,
the
well,
opportunity.
let's talk about openings. Well, they kept picking at me, so. Keep going, number,
All right, well, you don't have a lot of
How much?
time to be picked on.
okay, number 5, the percentage of openings and all the rest, and I think several people have talked about it. This is not the same kind of an opening. Whether we like it or not, we've gone from punched openings and small openings to this ribbon. And it's not even consistent. I mean, the thing that bothers me is that I don't want
5
to
is
look
on
at
the
this
next
wrong
one.
one.
5 is on the
By the way,
next.
I don't
5 is on the
know.
next. Is that the next one?
No, go back. Go back to. So we look at these we look at these, and we've got this, thankfully it's done them in red, and you can actually see how horizontal that is relative, but it's also the proportion. You've got numbers like 20%. By the way, a lot of these, if anybody looks carefully, are 10%, 11%. They're relatively small. And they're still punched openings, and there's something about punched openings that makes you read the wall, and this is a big sheet of glass. It's okay if we go into, it's a contemporary building, it's innovative, and so on, but even those people who did, whether we go international style, contemporary style, I don't care, look at some of those buildings, because I think you do need to look at some of those buildings. You turn the corner and you do a complete all glass thing. I look in the courtyard, which I don't know that we can see from the street, and I see a stone facade with openings, and it's not really punched openings in a stone wall. It's a frame building with a stone applique. So I'm trying to get to, also the solid and void thing, which I think is the next, is that number 4? I think, and I'm going to ask the commissioner, I don't think rhythm of solid to voids in the facade is what we were being shown here, or I understand it to be. I think when it says facades, it's the facade of the building, and it's the solids to voids of the facade, not the solid, not this beige solid to a building that is 50 feet to the north or 100 feet to the north. And I'm going to ask my fellow commissioners, because I'm not sure that's really what we were shown here or was demonstrated has anything to do with that point. And you know, and then we can talk about a lot of the others. I think it's number 8.
That's on the other side.
Yeah, I'm trying to skip 5. 5 was your thing about the rhythm of the roofs, and I don't know if that's on this one or not. I think it's the next one. I'm trying to skip all the ones that we have. Yeah, I should have put them all on one. No, they should have stopped one instead of the other. It's not your fault.
There's 2 large over there.
I know. It's just unfortunate. It was the same problem.
Well,
I'm trying to-
let's just get to.
Yeah, I'm waiting. No, you've got it on the next slide. You show this, I think it's.
Which standard are you looking for?
I think I was looking, I wasn't worrying about 5 as much, but let's go to 8. Yeah, I think it's bad, tell us that you relate to the thing. I should just make a comment here. You talk about, here we've related, but there's 16 buildings and we grade out 8 of them, which means half of the collection of buildings apparently were eliminated from this analysis because they don't make a point. So I'm not sure, the point here is roof shape. I mean, the roof mounted equipment, you've got it hidden, and I know there was a question about noise, but that's a separate issue, and I don't think it's ours at all. But I'm not really sold on this kind of notion of see our roof and see that one roof all the way down the block that somebody added, and that's an appropriate analogy at all. And I think a lot of people here have not really felt that the west side of the street is part of the same context as the east side of the street, particularly as they walk up the street, as Carl apparently does all the time. So number 10 is going to be the last one. Well, I think, in scale of structure, and I'm not sure that telling us that the massing is related by virtue of the gaps between is really what it's all about. I think this is all about the mass of the structure. And like it or not, and I know it's imperfect, but we get a better picture of what it's all about in this 3D model here. However imperfect it is, without some of the extra dormer, there's a lot more of them for those who can see these drawings than that model. And it's much better than this 2D model, 2D vision. And I think it still fails, if anything, on the basis of the mass of this building. And I have to admit, having looked at these drawings today and that model for whatever it is, and those who are architects can read past the simplicity of the model, it really makes this building much bigger than I imagined. It was one of the things that we talked about before, and I think it's still a problem.
Anybody else? Sally, Ken, do you have something, questions, comments?
I have a comment on 14, innovative design. Shall not be discouraged. I'm glad that some time was spent on that. We do live in a very diverse town. But it has to be compatible with the size and the scale that Elliot has already gone over, and the character of the neighborhood. And I just don't think it meets that standard.
Ken?
The number one thing that I think bears repeating is what Pauline was getting at, is that you can't take the peak of the roof and say that that is the height and push your first floor 5 feet up off grade, much higher than anyone else's first floor on the block, and then push the second floor to 18 feet above grade, far higher than any other second floor on the block, and have that high of ceiling heights and that height of a 2-story structure, and say that it's compatible with what are essentially 3-story structures with sloped roofs and attics. It just blows the scale of the block. There's just no way around that. I know they want to be up in their living room 20 feet in the air so that they have a great vista over the lake. That's not the character of this block. That's not the character of Lake Michigan or Illinois, where you're on a bluff overlooking the Pacific. I think that's the fundamental thing that's a flaw in this design, is the push to go vertical and get the living space up into space. And that's really the stumbling block.
I totally want to vote for this. After you guys read your presentation, I was like, oh, this makes sense, right? I want to vote for it. I love the fact that it's contemporary. I love the fact that it's new construction and that it's like different. I live next door to that Larson house on Michigan that's like this white box. I actually bought my house, which is a vintage stucco 1910 house, because I like the fact that it had like a really modern thing next to it. I really understand what it's going to be like for the neighbors to live next to like basically like a box, right? My neighbors on their north side of their facade, and there was a huge fight like in 1977 when they built that house, like, you know, before I was born, and that, the north side of our, or the south side of our house, our neighbors have no windows on that facade. So I look at this and I think, that's not that bad. I mean, it's sort of like, you know, at least you're relating to your neighbors. I literally live next door to a box with no windows, right? It's crazy. But, like, I have to agree with everybody else. And what Pauline said, I can't believe you guys, Morgante Wilson, didn't build a model for like a $5 million house. I don't get it. And like the mass of this thing, that is the biggest problem. I want to vote for it. I really do. I want a new house there. I want to walk by a really cool contemporary house, you know, when I'm walking my dog. But it's like, this is a behemoth, and it doesn't fit into the scale of that lot. And I know it's a really hard lot because it's like this hallway of a lot, and I don't know what you're supposed to do, but it's like, it really does blow the scale of the block, and that's the problem. It's like, I'm not against it being modern or contemporary or, you know, but like kind of raising it up on a platform and doing all those things, it's just like too big. And that's the only thing that's really shown how huge it's gonna be. And maybe it should be this huge, I don't know, maybe the Taco Bell house set a bad precedent, I don't know how that got built, but it's like, you know, I mean, it does seem like it's really irrelevant to the design. It's just gonna like overwhelm, like once it's there, it's like there forever, you know, and it's not like a good there forever. It's sort of like all these contemporary houses that you guys showed in the neighborhood, it's really interesting. My neighbors basically covered up their entire facade of their house with a garden because it looked crazy on that block. You know, and like all these modern houses in the neighborhood, almost all of them have done something to sort of like make the facade of their house disappear because they don't fit in and they look crazy. So I sort of feel like, I mean, all of those samples that you showed on that one page, they're all kind of like over vegetated, so you don't really like feel the severity of them. So I want this done. I really want this built. I hate that it's an empty lot for 12 years, but I think this thing is just like too massive for like what it's, you know, for the neighbors, especially the house on the south side.
Thanks, Carl. Jim, Mark?
I guess the question is, could you speak to the feasibility of, I mean, there have been various height issues raised, and I think I was confused, but I thought the living space had been modified down to the first floor, and I didn't think the basement was improved, so maybe there's some extra measures to clean up. But if you could speak to whether it would be feasible to build a house that was less high, to try to be more compatible with the roof height without giving a full effect to the peak of the slope approach.
We can talk to them.
Jim? Do you have?
No, I think everything's been covered.
Okay. Susie?
I just have 2 points really quickly. In regards to standard one for the height, I would suggest that maybe you look at tapering your height so that it goes from the street facades lower and it tapers to be higher in the middle. Communities that have new design currently does the reverse of that. The courtyard is the lowest in the spot. But perhaps since everybody has made comments on the gable roof sloping backwards, maybe it would be appropriate to try to slope your roof height from the front being lower and maybe perhaps the back being lower and the middle being a higher portion. Maybe that would be more compatible with the adjacent property. It would also reduce the proportions of the facades on the street, potentially on the back, so that people maybe from the front, it looks more appropriate, more compatible to the lower structures than it is. So perhaps that can be something to consider to address standards 1 and 2. Because it sounds like those are absolutely the main issues that we people today. So I also think with the height issue, Ken brought up a good point that if there's any way to reduce the 5-foot entry, perhaps with keeping the front lower, perhaps the entry elevation is done on the interior of the space as opposed to on the exterior of the space. So that again, the middle of it raises, but the front of it stays lower and more compatible with the design. I do greatly appreciate the material changes you have made and the rendering. I think that was very well simplified. I think there's nicely done with the stuff on the south, I think it's very appropriate. And in regards to the massive model, I think it would be very beneficial for you to show the open spaces, which I know are from the back of that building. Because right now it's shown as a solid mass, whereas you have a large open space on the back, and you have a large open space on the front. And I think that in that model, those are captured as solid masses as opposed to open structures. So if there is a way to accurately show it, the rendering is of course very valuable, but I think for the purposes of these conversations, it might be valuable to have a massive model that is reflecting those open spaces versus solid as part of that space.
Robert, any comments?
No.
Any points that you guys?
We had a gable roof tilting back 2 years ago. I'm exhausted. I don't know where to go. We were told that 2 years ago that it was not a complete building. It was a hybrid with a gable on the front and glass on the back, which was at that time being discussed. Now it's not the purview of the board to talk about the back, but I hear your comments. I think.
And in clarification, I am not requesting a gable. I'm merely saying you have masses with flat roofs that are stepping down and then step back up. Perhaps there's
But it's a risk,
flat
it's a
roofs
gamble,
and step up.
because if we do that, we start to step through, we get the whole mass coming marching in.
I understand.
We're just, it's the Albert Einstein. You are beating your head against the wall hoping for a different result.
Yeah, I think,
And
well, let's perhaps go back, because one of the things I think you had mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, and maybe this gets to really the core of the issue, which is really addressing the height concern that everyone has. And maybe that's, is that something that all of you have, I would get from what I've heard, is the height issue, which I think would, get to some of the massing issues and the scale that we're talking about. And if that's something that you folks want to go back and take a look at,
Sure.
we're more than amenable to see it next month.
I mean, I would just, to follow up what Carl said, I mean, I like the design a lot, I like what you've done a lot, and, I mean, I'd like to see you get it approved. I think that personally, if the mass could be, the front, if the height could be compromised a little, I would vote in favor of it.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we should vote.
And I think that's true for many of us. So I think that we want to work with, we want to make sure something happens there that really is respectful of the context. I mean, that's really it.
And I think you guys have made very good progress addressing all the other concerns.
And frankly,
Just
I
realize that you're-
don't think that there's any reason that, going forward, this couldn't be approved, assuming that issue is addressed. So,
In terms of context for that issue, we've heard several versions of this. And I would go back to, we came in here to talk about this project fresh, to present these standards as they were conceived as this project was developed. Historically, there have been several conversations about the height of this. There was a proposal from, I believe it came from neighbors at one point, that this house be limited to 32 feet, because that was the historic average between north and south house. We're at 30 feet.
That's true.
26.
That's true.
We've had a conversation here as well, and there's some discussion as to what would constitute the height. I think Elliot has pointed to the gutter line on the northern house. I think there's certainly a lot to unpack there, where we've discussed with the client in preparation for this meeting, the ability to lower that house. It's not going to come down 5 feet. It may be a foot. So I think going that, we need to understand whether or not that's even.
Johanna, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, good evening, Johanna Leonard, Community Development Director. So I just wanted to see if we could take a brief break to confer with the applicant and staff. I'm hearing you guys want to see this again, but September, I think I have a date at the Civic Center almost every night for different night meetings, and it flows into October. So I want to make sure that if that is the direction, we can confer with staff and the applicant about the timing of all those things. So
Yeah.
you would entertain a brief break, that
Yeah,
would be great.
that would be fine. I think the issue, I think conceptually what we're talking about is the regular October.
And I just want to check to see where we're
Yeah,
at
that sounds
with
fine.
items, and we have this
That sounds
little
fine.
property up north of the lake
And-
that is going to come for you before you.
Yeah, we know that. We know about that one.
Diane, can I just
Sure.
raise one issue that
Sure.
nobody has really addressed, and that's the sidewall of the courtyard and the wall that it's going to create for the house immediately to the south. And I don't think we really know what that looks like, what that relationship
Against the
looks like.
side? I couldn't hear you say that again.
There's the courtyard wall along the south.
This court, this in here?
That's the stone wall that has the punched openings in here. It's in the interior elevation.
Yeah, I'm just,
I think she's talking about the south.
I'm talking about the south wall, and I guess I could be talking about the north wall as well.
This,
It's,
I think she means the north
it's,
wall.
but it's hard to see what the side relation, what the side element, how the side facades relate to the houses to the north and south.
Okay, why don't we take a 5-minute break? Carlos, I know our tape runs out at 10 o'clock, right? So if we can make sure that we're back in 5 minutes, which is 9:47.
Huh?
It's not required. I suggest that.
I mean, you always ask people to build models.
Consider.
Hold on.
Feels like you waited to want the birthday candles, you know, so I'm telling you, like,
Okay.
oh, don't bring the pictures home, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so good evening again. Just wanted to say, I think the applicant and staff feels okay that we can take this to the October 9th meeting. We'll put this as old business. I want to be mindful that as we go forward, we're not, this can feel sometimes as though we're designing by committee. So, so I want to make sure Diane's going to lead us through the next step here. We're going to go through some standards to make sure that the design team can return and with their client focus on what the issues specific are to the commission and how we can ask the team to resolve them if they can't resolve them and to study those a little bit more. But be mindful that there is an interior of the home that still has to be constructed and that some of the issues with changing grades influence the stairs inside and the number of stairs between the different levels. So this team is prepared to take on the challenge and they'll return with some additional information and studies of the property. But be mindful, of course, that it's still, we're trying to build a house on a challenging lot.
Okay, with that, there were, just in listening to everyone and kind of based on my own thoughts too, is the standards that I heard, and I want, if I've missed one, please bring it to my attention, that there were issues with, and we're talking about the standards for construction, that is height, proportion of facades, rhythm of solids and voids, and I think it was the scale. Did I miss anything?
Well,
As the key ones.
I think those are key, certainly, and I believe that they're also embodied in innovative design. I think it depends on those key standards.
Okay. So does everyone agree with those four? And with that, what we'd like to do is provide the applicant, especially since we have a large number of commissioners still here, with a sense of what what you would like to see in terms of the height issue, in terms of the proportion issues, and in terms of 4 and 10, what would you like to see?
I think with the height, it's looking at what the other houses on the block have as a height of the first floor above grade, which is what you're doing. Looking at the height of the eave line, of the gutter line of gable roof or slope roof houses, and using that as your basis of analysis rather than the peak of a slope roof. Revisiting floor-to-floor heights and making sure you have something that's proportional and reasonable to the size of the interior spaces.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I think it goes to Pauline's point of why exactly is there a 13-foot difference between the first and the second floor when the first floor spaces are the private, small 10 by 13 children's bedrooms and so on? Does it really need a 12-foot ceiling and a 10 by 13? Or is that just excess bulk for the house?
And if you can also clarify what's under the 5-foot raised area, I don't know if there was confirmation whether I'm assuming there is no basement allowed, so just maybe the purpose.
There's storage and mechanical down there, so that's basically, so there are windows that allow light venting.
And those are the clearances you need for that equipment and its storage.
With no gable roof, the interstitial spaces are significant.
Okay, what about facades? Proportion of the facades?
In my opinion, if you address the height, like Ken was saying, I think the proportion of the facades is going to be addressed as just an indirect process.
Elliot?
I also think, no, I think the proportions have to do with, and part of it is true, and she said it, you know, and that's where this model is misleading, but I think it's what is the facade? I mean, it isn't 2 rectangles sticking out at us, and I think you're correct when you look at that. But I think that's where everybody's having a problem reading it. And maybe it's because as you read it, it's 2 large, long rectangles. I think her suggestion of you start lower and work your way up, maybe that would break up the mass of the structure, which also deals with the massing issue.
And I think
right
also
now,
with the rhythm issue.
but it becomes the rhythm. It changes the rhythm of the whole thing. And I think, you know, that whole thing about massing is where it comes about. I think somewhere in this, it's coming off as 2 large rectangles drawn above and above, regardless of the ends. And I think if you broke it up into something that was much more broken up, it wouldn't be as, I hate to use the term massive, but I think that's part of it. And I think that was her suggestion as well, starting out lower and working back.
Regardless of that, I would like to make a request if it is within our purview. I know that the physical model has not been something you guys have wanted to do, and I'm not asking it to be gorgeous. But I do think it would be very valuable in showing everyone to communicate the open spaces to the solid spaces. Because I do think that this design has a lot of that play. And I think it would give people more understanding of how those facades work together with the scale of the project.
Did you guys build a model for the owners?
We typically don't, but we will.
Yeah, because I also think it would, you know, as folks have mentioned, you know, there's a lot to be said for the design that you have for it. And, you know, our goal is to make sure that it's maybe even better,
I think, Fred, that the model would help, and it doesn't have to be cut out the openings.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think that changes it, because they look like they're punched open. I mean, as simple as, you know, pasting the facades, you've done that. And I think that alone at least starts, it also begins to locate where windows are in relation to the neighbors, which I think would be terribly useful. About what are you doing in relation to those 2 houses?
Any,
That would help.
So is the direction here that the context is only the 2 adjacent houses now? Is that?
I was trying to make it as easy as possible.
I think
But I think
that was,
that greatly narrows the scope of this body's duty
well,
to adhere to the
I
requirements.
don't think that that's, I think the issue there, Gary, is the relationship with those two houses. It's not that we're ignoring the context at all. I think it's the relationship of those two because that's the one that's the most critical. Sally, you were going to say something.
I was just going to add something to the idea of stepping back and the thought of doing that and the thought of Mediterranean homes and how they adjust their height. And it seems like a really good idea.
Okay. Any final?
So, Rich, I'm sorry, just because we want to be abundantly clear, when you make reference to us going back to Mediterranean houses and that methodology for stepping back facades, are you applying that to standard 2 or to standard 1? How are we to take that?
There was a discussion about the height, and I think that when you do the stepping back, that then that adjusts your scale, your proportion of solids to voids.
And we understand you're working with interior spaces, so it was merely made as a very basic conceptual recommendation. I do not know the design as well as obviously you guys do.
And I think
It was
the
a
other-
statement that was not intended to be, do this, and this will be, it was more just food for thought in that sense.
Okay. I think Johanna was clear that we need to collect the information from you guys.
Correct.
Because we'd like to come back and address
Absolutely.
these standards directly and to
Absolutely.
understand to what the Mediterranean style would apply here. And I want to be, this obviously,
I'm not
the imposition
suggesting
of the
that, I
style
was
is
just
not
implying the
appropriate.
stepping backness.
Right, so this has to do with
Reducing the mass.
going to your
Right.
notion that this thing needs to be reproportioned or
Mhm.
tiered.
Might help the height.
I'm gonna raise an issue here, sorry Sally, but I think to even say Mediterranean style and all the rest.
I retract
is
that.
We're dictating style.
All right,
And
yeah,
I think
thank you.
Totally
we
retract
do
that.
it.
And that's why I understand where you were going, but I would like this to be
I think it's
abundantly
it's
clear.
an incorrect suggestion in that respect. It's not for us to be, in a
Correct.
sense, dictating
And
that
I,
law.
yes,
No.
and
Sorry.
I think
Just
that.
talking about the massing.
Yeah, well, but that's, because it began to be this discussion of Mediterranean style.
Oh,
And
Yeah.
pretty soon it's gonna be the Taco Bell style, the
Redacted.
blankety
Yeah.
blank style.
Yeah.
And we're gonna
All right.
go,
Mediterranean's
We're done.
already been.
We're
how
done.
about Burger King next?
Yeah.
You know,
We're done.
the new McDonald's.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, the ordinance now does say that Lake Michigan is not a public way, just so
Correct. With that, and any final comments or questions from you guys? Do you have what you need?
Yeah, so I think the only thing we can say is, again, to remind this body, I know I take your point to be relative to the adjacent, visually related, we've talked a lot about. I would refer this body back to the standards. When you are occupying the public way, you see both sides of that street. You see end to end of that street. So the argument that a house may not be directly across, it may be catty corner, it may not be related visually to the adjacent house because it can't be seen in the model this way. I think this body has to continue to look at this in terms of the overall height, and there are larger houses, the references to Eve Heights on, in particular, the house to the north, I think are severely limiting, and the takeaway that we're gathering is that that's the data that this body is looking for us to make this argument based on. Is that
I
correct?
think that I don't agree with that at all. Actually, I think
So
that.
what data
I-
is this body looking for us to
I
begin
think
to
what we're
address?
looking for is some type of lower height based on the parameters
something.
that folks have described. It has, I'm not sure that we're gonna sit here and design it for you. That's really it. And certainly, as we mentioned before, contextually, we understand that this is a unique area within the city. So certainly that's going to be part of what we're doing, and we're not abdicating that in any sense of the word, but I think that, some relationships within that context are maybe perhaps a little more important than others, and so we're looking at that.
And I think two last things to run. Certainly the entirety of Edgemere Court is part of this, but in that this is not currently a contributing lot,
We
and it is
understand that.
then it is the entirety of Lakeshore District that need to be considered in terms of how this project
Gary,
and
we're not disagreeing
I
on
agree.
that. I think the thing is we understand the lot, we understand the challenges of the lot, and I think
And
that.
relative to one comment that was made in terms of support versus opposition to this project, the 80 signers, letter writers, and folks who reviewed this project with us when it went to the city council before, are all members. The predominant number of the group sign letter are members and neighbors in the Lakeshore District.
Yeah, I
They have
understand.
considered seriously what this effect is.
Right.
So I think that it's important to note that members of the community have also been shown and asked their opinion.
Yeah.
We found 80 members of this community.
That's
And I don't think
duly
that comment
noted.
came from the committee.
No, it did, but I think it should be.
That's
It should
fine.
be said that
No.
we have worked hard to
I understand that.
gather information on this and to adhere to these standards,
Yeah.
and to listen and to hear
Yeah,
and
I
respond
thought
to
that I
a
had
great number of
mentioned,
people.
I thought that I had mentioned that, or perhaps I did not, so. Okay, with that, if we can have a motion to continue this to the October 9th, am I correct on that day?
Correct.
Right. October 9th, our regularly scheduled meeting.
I move to continue 917 Edgemere Court to the October 9th meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Elliot, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, and with that, need a motion. It was everybody, Carlos.
Others County.
Jamie left. Jamie had to leave.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. And then with that, we need a motion to adjourn.
Move that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Okay. It was Sal and Robert, all in favor of adjournment.
You didn't even have to ask.
Well, I